And welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Kelly Craft, sitting in today for Ted Rollins, along with Julia Janae. We do have some breaking news to tell you about. The trial out there in Idaho for Bryan Kohberger. The judge has granted the defense motion for a change of venue. So a big development there in that case out of Idaho.
Absolutely. The defense has been trying to get it out of Latah County, there where those 4 University of Idaho students were tragically killed inside of that off-campus apartment. And they've wanted to get it to a bigger county, Latah County, where Boise, Idaho, the capital of the state is. And now we are getting word into our Court TV newsroom that the judge is agreeing to let that change of venue happen. So this could really change how things unfold, especially for jury selection in this case.
We just got into our newsroom a copy of the judge's decision. So it's pretty long. We were taking a look at it. It went through all the details that are known so far in this case. And he really talked about the totality of the circumstances here, and that is exactly why he decided to grant this motion to change venue. I think we're going to bring in our guest now, Julia.
Yeah, let's bring in criminal defense attorney Joseph Tully, who is standing by. Joseph, we've been watching this case from the very beginning, and there was a question of whether the judge would grant this. It can be rare for a change of venue to be approved by a judge. Your thoughts on the judge's decision in this case?
Well, you're absolutely correct. It is incredibly rare for a judge to grant a change of venue. It's a very complicated motion, very time-consuming, and you have to hire, experts that bring in statistics, analyze media. Obviously, this is going to be an unpopular decision for a judge to take the sense of justice away from a community to try their own case. However, I think that the judge made the right call. These crimes were so heinous and so well covered on the media that even if there was if there was a conviction in the case in that town, there really would have been a big chance for an appeal to win based on the trial was not fair. And so I think the judge made the right call by being able to move the case and preserving the sanctity of the jury's verdict.
The state was hopeful that it wouldn't be moved. Let's go ahead and play a little bit of the state's argument.
Finally, since we are talking about the interests of justice in the convenience prong of the rule, it is completely appropriate for the court to also consider the fact that most of the victims' families, not all of them, but most of them, live closer to Latah County than they do to Boise.
And that is something, Joseph, that the judge had to take into account. And again, in his ruling, we're just kind of getting through it right now, but it did say I have to take everything into consideration here. Obviously, that was one of the factors.
Oh, of course, yes. And that's why this was a difficult decision for the judge, because there's a community here and victims and witnesses and law enforcement, court personnel that now have to try this case, away from the community at greater expense and greater inconvenience to the party. However, the judge has to weigh in terms of all total justice. Can this accused person get a fair trial? And in extreme situations like this, where you have an extreme case and the accusations are extreme, that's when you will see these change of venues motions are granted, but they're incredibly rare. It's a very high burden to make. But I think the judge, like I said before, made the right call because otherwise, if there's a conviction in a case and it wasn't a fair process, then the defense can turn around and appeal and say, look at this media coverage. It was biased. This person, yes, they were convicted, but they did not get a fair trial. So I think in the long run, the judge made the absolute right call and sort of foreclosed that appellate issue by moving the trial now.
Do you think it will make a difference when it comes to these jurors and how many of them will be impacted by outside coverage, having known about this case beforehand? Because this was national news. And I do want to go back to what the defense said during this change of venue motions hearing that we covered that happened, of course, before this order came out. Let's take a listen back to that and get your thoughts on it, Joseph.
It's hard to imagine that one of those jurors who all of a sudden said, you know what, I'm not sure, and listened to more evidence and said, I'm really not sure. I don't think he did it. Are they going to be brave enough to do that, to write not guilty, to say not guilty, and to stand their ground? That comes right to impartiality. Imagine with me that we are here in June of 2025, and we're here, and we've seated 16 or so people over here. You're going to recognize some of them. People that sit in the courtroom in our audience that want to come and listen to the trial are going to see them. Even if they don't listen to the trial, people are going to know whose car leaves their driveway every morning to get to the courthouse by 8:30 for 3 solid months. And those jurors that sit over there are going to feel an immense amount of pressure to answer the call of the community to be safe.
And Joseph, I understand you've been able to get cases moved that you have handled. Just talk about that convincing of a judge, because sometimes when you have cases that are this high profile, judges say no matter where we go, people are going to know about this case and recognize certain parties.
Sure. So that is always a counter argument that a prosecutor can say is, look, Judge, everybody's going to know about this case. As you noted, this was a case that received national headlines. However, you have an extreme situation where you have a very small, tight-knit community where you just heard from the argument that there's going to be peer pressure, community pressure, and the saturation of the media coverage and the town talking amongst themselves is going to be so much greater in a small, tight-knit community. Whereas if you move it to a bigger city, a larger venue, you're never going to get a perfect jury. You're never going to get jurors who have never heard of anything, but you have a better chance of getting a fair jury. And that is what we want. We always want a fair jury, no matter how heinous the accusation, no matter how much media coverage the crime gets. We always need a fair jury for anybody. Anybody should be entitled, anybody in this country is entitled to a fair jury. So I think that the judge moving it increases those odds. And again, it's not going for perfection, because you can never get that. It's going for the most fair situation that you could get in any granted circumstance.
And Joseph, defense counsel really put forth a lot of arguments in regard to wanting this change. They brought in a lot of experts talking about just different media coverage, and there was some kind of analysis saying that where the murders took place, that with Washington State, actually the media coverage, the market, they were saying was actually bigger. But I really did think that the judge was going to end up moving it just to, as we talked about in the beginning here, avoiding something happening here on appeal. Better safe than sorry, just trying to ensure that Kohberger, can get a fair trial. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, yes, that's exactly what you have to do to win these kinds of motions. You have to bring in multiple experts. And it's very a lot of statistics, and it's very thick. The expert reports are very, very thick, hundreds of pages long. And they go through every type of media, radio, social media, television coverage, and they analyze it in terms of raw statistics. And so those experts are very expensive, and the reports are very dense. And I think that, that's just part and parcel of these motions. When people talk about change of venue, unless you have experts who can talk about pages and pages and reams of data, you won't have a chance of winning this. And here, because this is an extreme situation, they were able to win.
Kelly, when you mentioned Washington State, here's what it brought up for me. The distance. We were always thinking about the distance between Washington State, where Bryan Kohberger was a student, and the distance between the University of Idaho and where he would have had to travel. With this change of venue, and I know you've been to Boise covering the Daybell trial, but they're not going to be able to do any type of jury views in this case. The jury is not going to be able, I would think, and Joseph, I'd love to get your opinion on that, I don't see them taking this jury back out to Latah County to look at the location where the home was. We know the home has been demolished. It is no longer there, but they won't be going to any type of scene or driving along the same route that prosecutors allege Bryan Kohberger would have taken, because that's not even going to be an option if they are that far away.
I agree with you. So in that sense, this was a big win for the defense. However, I don't think this is a situation where it will make that big of a difference to the prosecution. The jury field trips is what I call them, are pretty rare. We've seen them on court TV be utilized in a very positive way for the prosecution. Here, I think the prosecution will now rely on maps, Google Earth, that type of thing, rather than going to the actual scene. But in this situation, because the house has been demolished, that would have been the only reason I think that a judge would have granted a jury to go look at the evidence.
Yeah, good point. But even, Julie, when you were talking, when we were out there for the Daybell case, a lot of us had been talking just because there's some downtime when you're covering your trial. Oh, maybe we'll take a ride up here. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a big area out here in Idaho, and it was going to take us a long time to get up to the area where this murder took place. And so, yeah, to your point, you can't exactly have the jury views.
Sure.